Trouble is mounting for South Africa's major banks, some of whom have recently been implicated in the rand fixing scandal. In the latest, more provinces are now allegedly threatening to move government bank accounts to state and development banks. Northwest, KwaZulu-Natal and Limpopo are reportedly planning to dump commercial banks amid outrage about collusion in the banking sector. The ANC in the Northwest is reportedly looking at closing government accounts with ABSA in favor of VBS Mutual Bank, which gave President Jacob Zuma a 7 million rand loan to repay his Nkandla debt. Limpopo is also reportedly considering a similar move to break the banking monopoly pending the creation of SA's own state-owned bank. KwaZulu-Natal ANC, on the other hand, is reportedly looking to move its banking portfolio from ABSA to Itala once the provincial state-owned entity gets its commercial license. The current climate of outrage against commercial banks is being fueled by a few key factors. Firstly, due to the evidence given out recently by Competition Commission of rand fixing in the banking sector. Secondly, the banks also face criticism for standing in the way of radical economic transformation. Thirdly, due to the calls for a judicial commission of inquiry into the 4 major banks. And now we're joined in studio by Botsang Muila, political analyst. A very good evening to you once again. Thank you so much for joining us on this conversation that we're about to have right now.
Okay, evening once again.
Now we know that a Sunday Times report says that key provinces are discussing possible shifts from commercial bank to black-owned development banks. What is your sense on this?
Well, I think the time and the moment has arrived. I've mentioned earlier on in the past debate that South Africans have been robbed, misled, and misguided by the commercial banks, which almost all of them are foreign-owned. I think these provinces, KwaZulu-Natal, Limpopo, as well as the Northwest, they are well within their rights as government institutions to say these are commercial banks that the government has entrusted the public monies with. It has come to the attention of this country that they have been robbing and cheating the country, colluding, as well as, conniving with foreign banks and agencies to devaluate the rand and to take money from the poor people of South Africa. It is well within the right of government to stop doing business as a matter of common practice with anybody who has been corrupt and who has been conniving in robbing the government money. There's rules in this country whereby if you render a service to a government department and you find to have cheated that government department, the government will severe doing business with you. And the same should apply to these banks. They didn't only rob one government department, but they've robbed the whole nation. It started with ABSA. It came out that actually ABSA was created with the monies of the public of South Africa. Then all other banks followed after to say they have connived with 14 other banks around the world to can cheat the country money. I think I will congratulate actually the leadership of the 3 provinces and the ANC as the leading party in those 3 provinces to say they are going to look at withdrawing their accounts from these corrupt, colluding banks and invest. What is critical is invest or bank or do business with black-owned banks. The problem may be the Treasury. It will have to speed up the process of granting licenses to some of the upcoming black-owned banks in South Africa, which are not having equal banking licenses as the commercial banks that we know. So they will need help from the Treasury to be able to license them, to put them in a position that they can compete fairly with the 4 major banks in South Africa. But I think it's a move in the right direction.
And now on the line, we're also joined by Knox Siabi, ANC Limpopo Secretary. A very good evening to you and thank you so much for your time. Is the ANC in Limpopo discussing a possible exit from a commercial bank to black-owned bank?
No, as the ANC in Limpopo, we discussed the possibility of establishing a provincial bank and alternatively supporting the banks that are already existing outside the Big Four. And we think if we were to do that, it will be a way of making sure that our people, especially because in Limpopo, we're a rural province where most of our people are poor, it will make sure, that move will make sure that we have our people having access to financial assistance from the bank, because the big four, in terms of their conditions of granting financial services to our people, in most cases is too expensive.
And we also have on the phone line, we're joined by Northwest ANC Provincial Secretary Dakota Legode. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. Now, is the Northwest ANC mulling a plan to shift its accounts from ABSA, and why is this?
Thank you very much, and to all the listeners and viewers of your station. Look, as a province, amongst preparations of our policy discussion document is to want to pursue the ANC in the forthcoming policy conference and the national conference to open up on the financial services sector business in the country, because in our view currently the sector is captured by a monopoly capital, which we can refer to as a banking mafia, because those four big banks, they decide who to accept as a client. They even decide who to dismiss for whatever reasons. And you know, in a constitutional democracy, none of us can become an arbiter except the court of law, in particular the Constitutional Court. So any dispute in society needs to be resolved by the Constitutional Court finally, if that is the case, so that there can be a ruling or a conviction. But these banks, they behave like bully boys and bully girls. They can even decline your account, they can close your account, they can do everything. And they do not have a competition. Now they are becoming bully in the approach. That's why we're considering also to consider having an alternative banks. We are considering also to reopen the agri-bank to assist our small holder farmers, because currently the current banking system does not allow them, does not even recognize the valuation of the land they own or land under the communal property system or under the traditional leadership, so that we can have a bank that can be sensitive to that particular aspect of our society. So currently the system, the banking system as it is, we don't think it can assist us to grow the economy. And again, is that the bully boys and the bully girls of the market are doing as they wish. For instance, in South Africa, the South African Reserve Bank licenses new entrants in the industry. And currently as it is, South African Reserve Bank is privately owned. Now, you can tell me, who will allow a competitor to come in if you are in charge? Because the Reserve Bank is owned, it's privately controlled, so they can't allow any new entrants. It's like asking a Dracula to take care of the blood bank and expect to get the blood. It will not happen.
So, Mr. Legode, are you saying that this move is a way to force competition on the banking sector?
The move is to force competition, not only in the banking sector, on the whole financial services sector, including insurances. Insurances which are there in our country are a monopoly. We need to increase the number of insurances, but insurances at least, they are more advanced than banks. Banks, it's known that they are controlled by the Big Four. And that Big Four is very arrogant. And that Big Four, through the banking council regulator, they control. Through the South African Reserve Bank, they own the licenses, they control. So there is no competition in this country for over 50 million people. I mean, just on your social services grant, you have 17 million clients who relies only on four companies which can collude even to rip off the poor. And there's nothing that is said in this country. There's an allegation by the Competition Commission that some of these big banks are colluding to rip off the poor in terms of the currency manipulation, and nothing has been said. And this is a serious allegation because it involves over 500 billion rand, and that's a lot of money. If you remember that we have to pay for free education, for quality health services, for roads, for everything, almost to get South Africa moving, even to create jobs.
Mr.
So
Nakotsi, I'm just going to hold you over there just for a second, because we're also joined by Knox Siabi on the phone line, ANC Limpopo Secretary. Do you also think that it is high time that the country needs a government-owned bank?
Yes, I think it's time, and that's what the ANC is busy discussing, because the ANC's resolution is that we must establish a state bank. And I think it's the right time that we need to investigate the possibility of establishing a state bank, and we make sure that we are serious with the establishment of a state bank. That will kill the monopoly that is there, that Comrade Dakota is talking about. Because once there's no competition and there is collusion also, the people who are suffering most are the poor of the poorest, and they can't access the services, as I said, and it creates problems. And with this collusion, the interest rates are high because those people don't care about our people. But if you have a state bank, it will make sure that it takes the concerns of our people at heart and make sure that there's access in terms of the banking system.
And I'm just going to bring it in studio. We are still joined by our political analyst. Now, will this move from the 4 big banks to the banks such as VBS, Mutual and Itala, which is in KwaZulu-Natal, will this be an easy process?
Well, I do not think it's going to be an easy process. The moving of bank accounts generally is a very complex process, especially state-owned bank accounts. And these banks, actually, they may be faced with a situation of dealing with bigger accounts than they have dealt with. That's one element. However, we should not underestimate the capabilities of these banks, given a fair opportunity. Everybody starts small and they grow bigger. But we should also expect as a nation that the 4 major commercial banks that are going to be losing business in this instance, they may be faced with a very difficult situation if they fold their arms. We must expect, reluctance from cooperation from them. We must respect the 4 major banks to actually try and use all avenues, including approaching courts, putting pressure on the Reserve Bank and Treasury so that they should not lose government accounts. I don't think the 4 commercial major banks in South Africa are going to lay back and allow this process of them losing major government accounts. But given a fair chance, given the support of the Treasury and the Reserve Bank, which is actually the governing body of the commercial banks, I think the move will be able to be done quite efficiently and effectively.
Now, looking at all these processes, should a banking tender be released, what kind of opportunities will this represent for the country?
Look, I don't think we should go on a banking tender because then we will not be comparing apples with apples. We know that these commercial banks are having a comparative advantage to what Itala, for example, or VBS has. They shouldn't go that route. It should be a decision of a client deciding to say, I'm closing my bank account with this bank and I'm moving to another bank. And if they want to go on a tender process or any other process that is going to put them competing, they should take into consideration the black economic empowerment. They should take into consideration factors that these commercial banks enjoyed apartheid era privileges and support to be where they are at the moment. And we should not allow the country to be held backwards and hostage by processes that were actually created to not give black-owned companies opportunity to can compete. At the moment, what is happening in South Africa is black-owned companies are competing with white-owned giant companies, and we are not taking into consideration the historical disadvantage that black companies had. We shouldn't be doing that. If we want to see the majority of the people in this country who are black taking over the country, not only administratively or politically, but economically, and as well as developing industries, we should create opportunities as a government for those industries to grow. Then we'll talk competition after we have put these banks at the same level as the 4 major commercial banks in the country. We cannot compare them at the moment. Upside on its own, it is where it is to be a major bank in South Africa due to the help they received during the last years of the apartheid regime. They became a giant bank due to the capital inject that they received from apartheid regime. Now, The South African government or the ANC government in these three provinces is not saying they're going to inject money into this Itala banks and so forth. They are saying we are moving our accounts, or we are considering to move our accounts to a black-owned bank that is focusing on developing black people, and we don't want to continue doing business with corrupt banks. We should remember the major element regarding this proposed move is there's two major cases. We are faced with the ABSA case in this country. We are faced with a competition commission finding that these banks are corrupt, they've colluded. Now, what is wrong in government? Trying to actually expect that the ANC to meet as a national body to make a decision, to give instruction to their ministers or employees to say, move your banks from these commercial banks across the government, across the country, not only provinces, municipalities, national departments. They should be shutting their bank accounts from these corrupt banks, from these colluding banks who have robbed this country monies, and move them to banks that we can develop as a nation, and in the process come with a bank. I've heard one of the leaders of the ANC in the province saying, now it's time to have a state-owned bank. I actually think the government needs two banks. We need a central bank that is public-owned, not like the privately owned Reserve Bank. We need a central bank of the country that is owned publicly. That's the first thing. The second thing is, what's wrong with our government having a commercial bank that is government-owned, that will compete with all of these corrupt commercial banks that we have in the country, and that will do business with government departments from a commercial point of view? This is long overdue. Organizations and movements like the Black First, Land First movement, they've said it as old as last year, January, to say the government needs a central bank. The EFF, on its manifesto as well, they've said it long ago about having a state-owned bank. So this is not news today. The problem that we did as a nation, we waited for the corruption of these banks to be exposed, while we knew all along that they are corrupt, they are colluding and conniving with international organizations to can actually make monies and wealth from not only the government but from the nation as a whole. So I think this is long overdue, and I think the government must put its acts together to can fast track the process of having a central bank of the country that is publicly owned and a commercial bank.
Thank you so much for that. We're joined by political analyst Botsang Muila, and on the phone line, I want to thank my guests for joining me. That was Knox Siabi, ANC Limpopo Secretary, as well as Northwest Provincial Secretary Dakota Legoeta. As you know, that trouble is mounting for South Africa's major banks, some of whom have recently been implicated in the rand fixing scandal, and we know that more provinces are now allegedly threatening to move government bank accounts to state and development banks.